Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode. Hey, founders, and thanks for listening to another episode of Category Visionaries. Today, we're speaking with Dr. Kai-Philipp Kairies, CEO and co-founder of Accure, a battery intelligence platform that's raised $18.5 million in funding. Dr. Kai-Philipp, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Brett, great to be here.
Super excited to have you, and I'd love to just talk a little bit more about what you're building today. Let's jump right into it. Take us back to the founding of the company. What were those early days like?
Yeah, so my background is I'm an engineer in Germany, a German engineer that really focused on batteries at a very early age. So I've been doing batteries for about 15 years now. And before starting Accure, I was leading one of the largest research groups on grid-connected battery systems in the world and just saw firsthand the challenges of the industry and especially the challenges that were coming, because the battery space is growing exponentially. And at the time, there weren't really good tools around to manage this growth. And so being a researcher in one of the largest groups in the world, I just had the intimate insights into what was going on in the world and thought, hey, there's an opportunity here to build a data platform that can manage all these batteries in a safe and efficient way.
And you did it at an interesting time, it looks like. So June 2020, a lot of crazy stuff was happening in the world. Did that really feel like the best time to start a company?
Actually, yes. It gave us something to do during the lockdown. So the entire team was hyper committed because there just wasn't anything else to do. And COVID for me, for a lot of people, especially with kids, COVID was a really traumatic time where for me, it was an open invitation to dedicate all my time on something that I love.
Makes a lot of sense. So where do you even begin? What do you start with? We talk with a lot of founders who have cybersecurity tools or e-commerce analytics platforms, things like that. But with the technology you're talking about, this is serious stuff. Where do you even begin? What did the first 6 months look like? What were you working on then?
Yeah, so perhaps to start with, what does Accure do? And then the first 6 months, obviously, were just a small part of that. But ultimately, what we do is we analyze data that is produced by batteries during their operation, voltage, current, temperature. We have some quite sophisticated physics-based and machine learning models in the cloud that can ingest that data and then tell owners and operators of these systems if a battery is safe, or if it will blow up in a week or two, if it's performing to the specifications as intended, and to optimize the lifetime. And in the first 6 months of the company, we were very privileged to start the company with signing a 2-year deal with one of the leading storage companies in Germany at the time, because they were really interested in the solution that we brought to the table. And then, of course, we had to develop and deliver. We were quite open about the timelines that it would take a few months, but you can imagine just starting a company. We're like 5 people. We've got this massive contract, and now we've got a deadline that we're running against. So COVID really was helpful because that way we could dedicate 18 hours a day to developing a product.
How did you get that contract in the first place? As a startup, as an early stage company, how do you get an organization to give you a 2-year contract?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing is at the time, I already had almost a decade of experience working in the industry in different roles as an engineer, as a researcher. And so the first contracts that we got, the first one, and then also the next 3 or 4 ones, they all came from my network. So it was people that I had a relationship with, that trusted me, and that most of them had worked in other situations with me or my team before. So they knew that we were solid. They knew that we could deliver. And the solution that we offered them was just really attractive because we knew so intimately what their pain points were, right? From working with them over years and years, we said, hey, with all the information that we got to know you in the last time, this is something we believe could be really good for you. And they said, hell yes. And then, of course, you need to be a little bit lucky to catch the budget. And it took us some time to get that running. But once we did, things kind of built up from there.
I was spending some time on your website yesterday, and as I was going through it, I was very impressed with how simple and clear the language is. Sometimes when I interview founders, I walk away just wondering, like, what the hell does that company do? None of this made. But just looking at that headline that you guys had, it was like turn battery data into business intelligence or something along those lines. That stuck in my head, that resonated, and that made sense. Did you start off with like crisp, clear messaging? Like, was that your day one message, or what did it take to this clear of a message?
Oh, absolutely not. Quite the opposite, to be honest. Just imagine we've got a number of founders, but like 3 full-time main founders, and we all got a PhD in some really nerdy topics. So our CTO, George, has a PhD on aging behavior of batteries. Our COO, Hanno, has a PhD in thermodynamics, and I have a PhD on battery usage in the grid. The 3 of these people will not come up with crisp language when describing what they do at day one. So we needed help. And I think we were smart enough to engage people that would complement us early on and learn with them, because otherwise it would probably still be impossible to fully understand what we do, or only people from the in-group could tell. But as we want to grow, we want to grow as a company, and that means also selling to people who don't have a PhD on the topic. And it's so important to communicate the value and not the details in the back end.
Who helped lead the charge, or who helped simplify that? Did you hire like an amazing VP of marketing or CMO? Did you contract with an agency? How did you refine that? Go from 3 PhDs talking batteries into like this crisp, clear language?
Honestly, the first and most relevant input we got was from our early stage investors. And this is a fun story. We always knew that in order to catch this market opportunity, we needed to raise venture capital and move fast. And we went out to raise a seed round, trying to explain to venture capitalists the market opportunity. Okay, they got it. Our technology, they absolutely didn't get it. The end. Because in our view, there's the market opportunity, there's the amazing technology, the rest will follow. Come on. That's a no-brainer. And just as academics, for us, that was all we needed, right? And no one understood it, and no one wanted to give us money. So it took months until, just from the feedback we got, improved slightly. And then one of those venture capitalists actually took me aside and said, hey, I really think that there's something there, but you're so bad at telling the story. Can we please sit down for 2 hours to fine tune your pitch, and then I can bring it to my investment committee? But as it is right now, they would laugh me out. So I really want to make this happen. Can we sit down? And that guy really took the time to sit down with these, nerdy young founders, fine tune the pitch deck. And after we had the fine-tuned pitch deck, we also sent it out to a few other VCs, and we got positive responses 5 out of 5 times. And we got term sheets. And some of these offers were actually better than the one we finally went with, because if this guy can make our company so much better in 2 hours, this is worth any valuation that other ones could throw at me. And this guy's still our chairman of the board until today, actually.
What did he do like exactly, or maybe like some of like the specifics? How did he frame the narrative, and how did he, kind of define that story, or refine that story, I should say, so it could get to that point that you're able to get a higher valuation, more term sheets, all of that?
I think what was really amazing about his approach is he understood where we were coming from. We were engineers. An engineer needs data points. And so the first thing he did was explain in simple terms how venture capital works. What are the expectations of VC? How are they being evaluated? And if you just establish this fundamentals, so this is how their business model works, this is the power law, and this is what everyone's betting on. So if you can't prove to be inside that group of exponential cases, don't even try. Really just the fundamentals. But once you get that, and you have a little bit of common sense, which I think we did, it all turns around. And then you can come up with much better suggestions where that person will say, well, a good deal better, but we're going to fine tune it a little more. And this took less than 2 weeks. Like the entire process of turning from, hey, we've got a really cool technology, please give us money. Here's how we're going to grow 3x year over year for the next 3 years. This is the customer groups we're going to approach. I had that all in my head, but I just didn't think it was necessary to lay it out in detail at first because I thought it was so obvious.
When you go to companies now, do they get it right away? Like when you say we're a battery analytics company or we're a battery intelligence company, are they like, oh, yes, like I've been looking for one of those. I'm in market right now for one of those. Or are they more like, what the hell is that? And like, why do I need it?
So right now, most of the relevant companies, most potential customers know about battery analytics. 3 or 4 years ago, they didn't. And I believe that we were a part of this education of the market. This is one. On the other hand, as companies like automotive companies or grid operators that also have batteries in their systems now, as they get more mature, more and more run into the problems that we're solving. 3 or 4 years ago, a lot of these companies had electrification plans and perhaps they had a few pilot projects or a few early rollouts of electric cars, but they didn't depend on these vehicles or batteries to be successful. Now, as these batteries become a vital part of their business, all of a sudden performance, safety, lifetime really matters. So the market is now more and more experiencing the pain that we as a company are solving, and they're much more open to solutions. And the beautiful thing about software solutions, of course, is they're very scalable and easy to implement. There's also hardware solutions, how we can fix some of these problems. But if there's a software solution that offers similar outcome at a much better scalability, lower complexity, and lower cost, it's going to be the software solution 95 out of 100 times.
What does the competitive landscape look like with kind of these trends all pointing towards there being a massive market here? I'm sure you're not the first founder to say, okay, I'm going to build technology to solve this and capture this market and win this market. How do you think about competitive landscape and how are you positioned within that landscape?
Yeah, so especially in the last 12 to 18 months, there's been almost like an explosion of companies trying to break into the field. Either it's companies that have been doing data science, artificial intelligence, that discovered the field of battery data for them, or it's completely new startups that come from the battery space and are basically on a very similar journey like we were 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, number one, I think that's great because it just proves the point that there is a market. 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of people said, well, the battery manufacturers, they're going to do it themselves, or the fleet operators, they will have their own solutions. Why do we need a third party? And I think that right now it's pretty clear that there is room in the market for dedicated third-party battery analytics providers. Now, how are we positioning ourselves? We have a very strategic approach to the market in terms of being the best solution for a relatively small group of customers and winning that market. And the group of customers that we're mostly working with right now are grid-connected batteries. So batteries that store solar or wind energy in the grids and operate those batteries for 10 or 15 years. And the beauty about this class of battery owners is they are making money with batteries every day. So if the battery is a tiny bit better, they will make more money tomorrow. So it's super easy to approach these companies and say, look, this is the revenue you would make without us. This is the revenue you would make with us. Give us a 3 or 6 month trial period to prove that. And then you've got a positive return on investment on whatever you pay us. That's a great pitch. If you go to an automotive company, on the other hand, it's more of a strategic project. They have their internal teams, they have their internal capabilities. Do they really want to work with a startup instead of taking that money and increasing their own internal teams? So it's more of a challenging strategic situation with some of these equipment manufacturers, but we're also engaging in these projects and we're really hoping that over the next 4 or 5 years, some of them will open up to fully roll out to a fleet.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
Something I also noticed on the website is you have a strong presence there. You're in that intro video and you're really out there. And I saw you've done a lot of podcasts. Obviously, you're chatting with me today on a podcast. What role does founder-led marketing and founder-led sales play in this? Yeah, it looks like you're really putting yourself out there. Is that on purpose? Is that part of a strategy?
In a way, yes. I mean, my background is really like this nerdy battery expert that has lived and breathed the industry for 15 years now. And I think in a way that I'm a good representation of what Accure stands for. At Accure, we have some of the most talented, dedicated battery people in the world together. And that makes such a difference. Companies that work with us are guaranteed to work with people that are the best on the planet. And so by going out there as the battery expert and not as the serial founder or not as the salesperson, but really as the expert that knows the industry fairly well, this is what we want to communicate with our audience. At the same time, of course, we also need to diversify. And I'm not involved in sales at the moment. So of course, if there's a big deal, I will say hi now and then, or perhaps participate in a contract negotiation. But in order to be scalable, it's so important to let go of a lot of the tasks that are fun, including sales and including product development. But it's so much better if you have a robust process and scalable process and a team. So my job is really to represent the company and show what we stand for. But then there's a fantastic team of experts to actually execute on this mission.
What was that journey like transitioning out of founder-led sales? That's something that I've seen just a lot of founders struggle with. And yeah, I think it's just very, very hard to get right. What was that like for you and what'd you learn?
Oh, it's so hard. Because obviously the first 10, 15 deals that you do as a founder, they kind of build the company, right? If a venture capitalist invests in a seed round, what they want to see is some initial traction. So getting one more deal can really make or break an A round. Right? So the commercial impact on the company might not be as huge, but because you have this multiplier of venture capital, there's this massive focus on being able to hit sales targets. And as CEO, founder, your responsibility is to make the company successful. So there's this very big incentive to involve yourself in sales. Right? Because you need to get that deal and you're probably the most qualified person. You've been with the company for the longest and you have the most experience in all these things. But it's a trap, right? Because you can only dedicate so many hours in a week to this topic. And as you're growing exponentially, you're not going to be able to keep doing it. And if you only start to transfer your responsibilities to a team when you hit the limit of your own hours in a week, it'll be too late. They won't have the time to find their feet, right? And then things start to break. So we very intentionally started this transition earlier than it was needed to figure out, hey, do we have the right people in place? Do we have the right strategy in place? Sales people will have to have a different process than a founder, right? I can come in and say, look, I've been doing this for 15 years. This is how we do it. Do you agree? I can come in with a kind of swagger as the founder, as the CEO. People just perceive you differently versus a sales rep. And building that playbook that also works for sales reps, that's scalable, it takes so much time. And in the beginning, it's worse. The results are worse than you just going out and doing it yourself. And the temptation to just go back to do it yourself is so high. But again, it's a trap. People out there, don't fall into this trap. It's painful, but it's worth it. I can go on holiday for 2 weeks and my company will be fine. And I love that.
Every founder listening to you say that is probably jealous right now. They're crying tears of jealousy.
I'm not going to say it's easy to get there. And even during holiday, I will still answer emails and do stuff, but in a pretty controlled way. And I have a big trust in my team because I can see the results. They're great. And we're still iterating, of course, but it's the only reason we got there is because we started early and we kept pushing even through some initial mistakes. You might lose a deal in the process. You might lose 5, but it's the only way that people learn it. It's the only way that the organization matures, and it's absolutely worth it.
What about the marketing team? What have you learned from building marketing teams, and what's the marketing team look like today?
Our marketing team is relatively small at the moment. We've got 3 people, just hiring for a 4th. So if you're a content creator and interested in working at one of the coolest startups around, Accure.net, check out our job offerings. So we've got a VP of marketing based in the US. By the way, the headquarters of Accure is in Germany. We do have an Inc. in the US, and expanding as a European company to the US is another story. Very exciting, very challenging, but it worked very well for us. And so, yeah, our VP of marketing is based in the US. We've got 2 marketing managers here in Europe, and we're currently hiring for a 4th person.
Talk to us about that expansion into the US market. Was that an easy decision to make? A lot of the founders that I speak to from Europe, they toy around with that idea, but from what I've gathered, there's a lot of apprehension. A lot of founders say, the US market is a different beast. It's very expensive to compete in those markets. These Silicon Valley startups that raise FU money, and you have to go head to head with them. What was that thought process like? You thought through expanding to the US and making that decision to expand to the US?
Yeah, I can just second all what you just said. It's true. A good rule of thumb for a European founder would be calculate the worst case in terms of cost that you believe the US expansion will cost you, and then add 50% to that. And that will be a healthy baseline of what to expect. The US is so much more expensive than Europe in terms of salaries, in terms of operations, many other things. We were lucky, really. We were lucky on so many levels that I don't even want to say that we fully deserved the success we've got, but we're very happy that we got it. So we raised our seed round in 2020 when the venture capital market was already pretty warm. And then in 2021, when it got really hot, a US investor preempted our A round, and their pitch to us was very convincing. They basically said, look, we know that you don't need money right now, but we believe that we're the perfect investor for you guys, and we're going to make you an offer that you won't refuse. And they did, and we didn't. So no, big shout out to Blueback Capital. They're a fantastic investor, very smart, very, very well networked in our space. And not only did they massively support us with finding our feet in the United States, setting up the entity, they also introduced us to the person who would a few months later become our president of North America. So he came directly from the network of our investor. And if you've got contacts to first customers, if you got a person you can rely on as the leader of the subsidiary, and then some introductions just to the general network, that's like 3 out of 4 most important things that kind of fell into our lap with that investment. And then I think we executed well. And so last year, this is just less than 1 year after we started the subsidiary, already a quarter of our revenues came from the US business, which is amazing. Most startups fail, and we're not only not failing, but actually growing very nicely and sustainably over there.
3 years, 5 years from now, what do you think that revenue split is going to look like? Is it going to be 50-50, or do you think eventually the US market, just because of the size, is going to make up the majority of revenue?
I believe potentially the US and Europe could be an even split, but I think if we look at 3 to 5 years out, we will probably also increase our engagement in Asia. And so I think that we might end up with a, well, let's say 40-40-20 split, US, Europe, and Asia.
From a go-to-market perspective, what's been the most important decision that you've made to date?
Focus. It is so important to focus all the time, but kind of especially for us. We do battery analytics. In general, we could improve every battery around, right? From micro-mobility scooters to toys at home, to high-end cars, to batteries in airplanes, in ships. And this, again, is a trap because you will find companies that are interested in trying out something innovative, like the innovators in all these verticals. And as a founder, it is so tempting to take up every customer that's interested in you. I mean, in the beginning, most people will tell you you're an idiot, you're insane, no one's going to need it. Someone else is going to do it better than you, right? The first years of a founder of a young company is basically justifying that you exist. And now, if there's a company approaching you that is interested in what you're doing and perhaps even willing to pay you for it, it is so tempting to take the money, even though the use case is slightly off what you initially planned, right? I mean, it's not that much of a change. It's just like 20% difference. We can customize this. And then another company comes that's not 20% to the left, but 20% to the right. And again, you feel like, oh shit, I need that revenue. I need to show that we're here to stay. Again, it's not a perfect customer, but we'll take it. We're going to make it happen. My tech team is great. They're going to find a solution. And after 7 or 8 of those customers, you're basically a consultancy and no longer a product company. And that's really what can kill your company. And I want to say we were a little bit smarter in the beginning, but we also had some customers that we separated from actually after a year or two where we said, hey, we love working with you, but it's just not, we don't want to go where you would need us to be to serve you best. Let's not extend this contract. We want to focus on something that you're not that interested in right now. And once you start doing that and you're really doubling down on the thing you believe is most important, there might be a few months where you don't get any payback for that, perhaps a year. But once you've built your vision of the product and it really helps a certain group of customers, that group of customers will come to you. And all of a sudden, you've got all these economies of scale. You've got happy customers that are all equal. So if one comes up with a product idea, like a new feature, you can roll it out to everyone else. And then everyone else is more happy and will get more business your way. So focus on something really small and dedicate your time to it and make the difficult decision to say no, even if someone's willing to give you money.
Final question for you, since we're up on time and it's 8 p.m. now on a Friday in Germany. So
It is.
I won't hold you any longer here. Final question. Let's zoom out 3 to 5 years. What is that big picture vision? What's the company going to look like? And what's the impact going to look like?
I mean, I'm obviously biased here, but I'm a strong believer that batteries are an essential part of our mobility and energy future. In order to have a fully renewable energy society, we need functioning batteries. And I believe that the software tools that we're developing and rolling out here at Accure will be a cornerstone of a successful battery economy. Ultimately, I believe we have the potential and the ambition to improve every battery on this planet, whether it's in a motorcycle, in an electric car, in a ship, or in a stationary storage system. And we're going to get there vertical by vertical by becoming the number one solution, the no-brainer that everyone wants to work with. And then we're going to copy and paste that to the other fields until we can improve every battery on this planet.
I love the vision, and you can definitely consider me a fan and a believer, and I'll be rooting for your guys' success. Before we wrap up here, if there's any founders that are listening in that want to follow along with your journey, where should they go?
Oh, so we're quite active on LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn and then Accure Battery Intelligence, the website is accure.net, accure.net. And I think these are the best places to find us.
Amazing. KP, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Brett, thank you.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.